Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Rooted Realities, where we talk everything homesteading, animal husbandry, gardening, and so much more. As always, I'm your host, Annie Garrett, and today we have a super fun guest on with us to talk about all things native plants. Our guest is a native born and raised Texan, which is so cool, with over 3 years of experience with landscape design, installation, houseplant consultation, and native plant education. So she is just a wheelhouse of information on native plants. So if you are someone who struggles with finding native plants to incorporate into your yard or your area, then this episode is absolutely for you. So let's welcome Rachel of Rachel Reynolds Dreamscape onto the podcast.
Hi, Annie. Thank you so much.
We're so excited to have you, Rachel. So one of my favorite questions for people is to get to know their why. And I found you on Instagram and I love that we've connected. It's been so cool. So you've been all about native plants and I found you because I bought property in Idaho. And so we've got this huge acreage and we were kind of overrun with some not so lovely plants. We've got cheatgrass everywhere and kind of all of those plants that you don't quite want. You know, the cheatgrass that gets stuck in the dog's paws and the ears. We've already experienced that with Lulu. She got a piece of cheatgrass stuck in between her paw pads and it led to an infection.
Oh,
So it was so not an enjoyable experience. So I've been learning how to incorporate, healthy plants back into this ecosystem over here to just help the soil and get everybody back to a beautiful, happy life. So I'm so curious, what got you started on plants?
yeah. So I got into plants when I was in college. I went to the University of Houston, graduated in 2021. Nothing to do with horticulture. Everyone asks of me if I have a horticulture degree. No, I got a liberal studies degree. But so I had a couple of plants. My roommate was more into it. So I was it was casually into cacti and stuff like that. And then I started working at a nursery about 4 years ago, and I'll name them because I have nothing but good words for them. It's called Buchanan's Native Plants, and that's where I learned everything about native plants. And they started kind of letting me do public speaking about the natives because when I first got there, I didn't even know what a native plant was. And for anyone
Wow.
who doesn't know, it's a plant that has occurred in a region naturally without us bringing something in. But yes, you mentioned having to clear out all of these other unwanted plants. That's the hard part. There's so many unwanted plants that there is less room for our native plants. But yes, I just actually left my job at Buchanan's because I'm going to go woofing. I'm not sure if you've heard of woofing.
Have.
Okay,
Yeah, I
yes, stands
have. But
for
for the people who don't know, feel free, fill us in.
yeah, so it stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. And basically, you can pick a farm or a location where you want to do some volunteering. And usually, there's a host, and you can kind of live with them, or there's some kind of benefit that they support you while you work there and do volunteer work for them. So I'll be going to Vermont for the summer because last summer was just the hottest summer of our lives so far. So I was I think I'm really ready to move on with my career. And they've been, Buchanan's been so good to me. It was really hard to leave, but I gotta go. I gotta chase my dreams. So that's what I'll be doing next.
Oh, that is so cool. I love that, you're realizing my time has come. I've been here for some years and, I've outgrown this, and that's really cool. I feel similar in leaving the farmer's market that I was managing. And it was a really heartbreaking goodbye, which I think you experienced the same with your nursery.
Oh yeah.
And I think, I love that we have that versus I'm leaving a really toxic environment, and it just pushed me out. I love that it's a bittersweet goodbye,
Oh,
and we're moving on to, bigger, better things.
yeah.
Woofing is so cool. I had some friends right out of high school go into woofing and they've had really great experiences. And even I had some friend from, I grew up in South Dakota, born and raised there, and now I live in Idaho. And I had some friends who woofed down in South America and had some really cool experiences there. So I'm so excited to hear
Yeah.
about your journey and follow you along. So, and I'm glad that you get to escape the Texas heat because
Right.
fall.
Oh my gosh, it was brutal last year, which is what we'll mention later when we talk about more native plants. So, yeah, I'm excited to get
Great.
into it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the importance of native plants. So I know you've got some specific plants that you want to talk about. So let's just jump right into it.
Yeah,
Sure.
so nature is full of very specialized relationships. Like a specific insect or like a specific bird has a really special relationship with a plant, and we have to try and conserve those plants because these are the plants that are going to save our ecosystem. But I wanted to talk about one plant in particular, oak trees, which are all over North America. I think there's something
Mhm.
like 300 different species of oak trees, but there are like 900 different caterpillars that eat the leaves of oak trees. There are bird species that depend on their acorns for survival. And specifically, I wanted to talk about blue jays because blue jays, actually, we had a what they call a mast year this year with the oak trees where they dump all of these acorns. There's so many acorns this year. They're all popping up under my oak tree, like
Wow.
little baby trees. And it's kind of like, oh gosh, I have to go and dig these up because I can't have a second oak tree under my oak tree. Um,
Right.
but blue jays have evolved alongside oak trees for like literally millions of years, and they actually have a specialized bill. They have this little hook that is helpful for opening acorns. And acorns are a huge food source for birds, obviously, squirrels, other things like that. And blue jays, they bury like thousands of acorns per year everywhere, but they only
Oh
dig
my,
up like I think one in four. So our blue jays are planting thousands of oak trees for us for
oh
free.
my,
All those companies, they're like, buy our tennis shoes and we'll plant a tree. Every shirt plants a tree. Well, if we would just let, nature do that for us, it would do it for free. But so, when we have a species like that that hosts, and when I say host, it means like they depend on that species for survival. Sometimes it's like a larval host,
mhm,
like caterpillars. When you take something like that away and we plant non-native trees that have no relationships with any of these, animals, insects, they're like, we have no, what is this tree? I don't have any use for this. Where's my oak tree? Um, so it helps support everything that we're trying to do here. So yeah.
that is so cool. Oh my God. I had no idea that birds planted seeds. Like that's their way, of saving, like what squirrels do when they find their little holes.
Hmm.
Oh my God, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of stellar jays. I think that's what they're called here. But they're like a black and blue bird. So they've got like a black like head and body, and then they've got like a blue tail. And for the longest time, when we first moved out here, like Chip and I and some of our contractors were like arguing over like what kind of birds these were. And we found out that they're stellar jays. And so they've got like this little I don't know, they've got feathers that come out like a point on the back of their head and they look really cool. So I love learning about all of these birds. So I'm gonna have to do a deep dive and see, if they're
There's
as
so much, yes. And
yeah.
it's not just the birds too. There's also like native bees. So many native bees are pollen specific, so they only feed on the pollen of like a specific native plant. So when
Mhm.
we don't have those plants available to them, they can't survive. Honeybees are very popular, which I'm sure you're like familiar with the honeybee thing.
Mhm.
Honeybees are kind of like a domestic. It's kind of like a, like a farm animal almost. They don't do as much pollination beneficially rather than like native bees and things like that. So great as a hobby,
Interesting.
great for making honey, pollination, and distributing pollen. Maybe not so much.
That's so interesting. So, like, native bees, are those like your carpenter bees? And what other kinds of bees are there?
Yeah, there's carpenter bees. There are a lot of solitary bees, so they don't actually have a hive. They just kind of keep to
Oh,
themselves. But yeah, there's hundreds of species of native bees, which unfortunately we're losing a lot of because we're not planting the plants that they need to survive. So
which is really scary because that means, all
yes,
that less food and there's a whole, the butterfly effect. We're all familiar with that.
yeah, yeah. Like nature has this whole everyone's working together, and when you remove one thing from that circle, it just kind of goes off kilter. And that's kind of also why I stopped spraying pesticides when I first got into gardening. And I think everyone has this, the panic of, oh my gosh, something is eating my plants,
Uh-huh.
good. Something should be eating your plants, because when you have like pesticides and you're spraying things, when you remove one pest, you're removing the food source of a different beneficial insect, and then the whole thing kind of just gets off kilter. And then you also have like a different pest become a problem. So I think it's better to just leave it alone. But usually with like stuff like caterpillar damage, I'm like, good, something good. A caterpillar is eating your plants. Good. That means a bird has a meal because there's a caterpillar, and that means the bird can plant trees for us. So
Yeah.
mhm.
I love that conversation. So I am learning all about the natural, pesticides where you're just like using ladybugs or, some other larva inside your greenhouse because I had an aphid infestation and I haven't been gardening for that long, maybe, 2 or 3 years. So I went on Instagram and I was like, can you guys help identify this bug on my plant? And people were saying that's an aphid and you should, sprinkle diatomaceous earth everywhere. And then I had some other people comment and say, don't you dare do that because that diatomaceous earth is going to inhibit, all of these other natural and all of these microbes and all of the other
Yeah.
bugs, the
Mhm.
beneficial insects in your greenhouse. And it's just going to, you know, kill them off where it's going to
It's a
throw your
painful
greenhouse
death too.
out of. And I think that might have been you who was like, Annie, don't do that.
Oh, maybe. I mean, I like diatomaceous earth, for houseplants. I find it really useful for houseplants, but that's because it's not outside and there's no access to it for other insects. But I have like sometimes, you get pests on your houseplants. Diatomaceous earth, very useful, but it's non-selective. So yeah, any insect that touches it is going to get their exoskeleton shredded and they'll die. So
Shredded. We use it in the house and in the chicken coop.
yes, perfect.
Yeah, 'cause it keeps all of those mites away,
Yeah, it's
and
very
it
convenient,
keeps
very
everything
underrated.
clean. Yeah, yeah, but in the garden, I've learned that it's not the best place, at least because we do an outdoor garden and we have a greenhouse, so I've learned, let me find some ladybugs or let me find, some other, bug to enlist the work of inside my greenhouse to help with all of that.
Yes. And sometimes it's
So
even ants that put the aphids on your plants in the first place, and you're like, if you see ants on your plants, you're like, "What's going on here?"
guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another thing that I wanted to talk about was we have this massive property full of trees and we bought raw land when we moved out to the mountains and so we've slowly been building all of the infrastructure and we have this beautiful home and we're working on building a little bit more. So we're putting a shop in and there's a couple trees that we unfortunately will have to cut down, so we're working on being really conscious of the trees that we do remove because we want to be careful of erosion, number one. And like, we don't want to disrupt the natural ecosystem too much because we have so many bugs and animals that live in these trees. So one of the big downsides of living in the mountains, especially up here, is our soil composition is mostly like decomposed granite. So it's really hard to find plants that will thrive in there. So we kind of go more towards the Firewise garden, which I think like is a really cool conversation. I don't know if we have time for it today, but finding all of those plants that are really drought tolerant and thrive in really loamy soil has been really beneficial for us. And we still have a lot of erosion problems just because we live in the mountains and, with heavy rainfall and heavy snowfall, it's just a way of life out here. Things are going to roll downhill. So, do you have any like plants that are great for erosion control? Any recommendations that you have?
Yeah, definitely some native grasses. Grasses have huge root systems, like your prairie grasses, 6 feet at least, if not more. And that's why it's so beneficial to have them, is because they're rooted. They're holding on to the earth, and it's not going anywhere. And they also have such deep root systems to survive like wildfires. So if you can, find some native grasses that may be native to your area, that might be helpful for you. But yes, a lot of grasses, and they also help with flooding. We have a lot of flooding problems here in Houston. We had Hurricane Harvey, a couple years ago. So there's so much development, especially in Houston. I know you're in the mountains, but in the cities and places like that, super important to have these plants that are going to help us with our erosion control, because we're just building, building, building stuff, parking lots, shopping centers. Even in my hometown area, like I'm in the suburbs, they're building more stuff, and they kind of have regulations where, oh, okay, if you build something, you have to plant things too. They're like, okay, guys, you got to plant stuff, but I've seen the list of approved plants and trees, and I'm very not impressed with the list. But and I'm like, we need to pick plants that are going to help with erosion control. And they also kind of mandate that you have a retention pond area. Like if you build enough, you have to have a sort of drainage area. But I found out you can
Yeah.
actually pay like $80,000 to forego the drainage zone. You can actually pay your way out of preventing erosion and flooding. So these native
Of
plants
course.
are just such a huge tool, especially when you're, in a parking lot. When they're like, okay, plant trees, plant stuff in the parking lot. It's really hard. It's brutal out there. Trees do well together, but a single tree
Mhm.
alone in a parking lot, it's kind of, they're going to suffer. So if we can incorporate things like native grasses and, in ditches, native plants that are going to hold on to that earth, so helpful for any kind of environmental disaster that may be headed our way. I heard hurricane season is going to be really bad this year, so I'm a little terrified.
I
Um,
feel like every season is really bad this
yeah.
year.
Oh yeah.
Like, our winter definitely, like, was not as it has been in the past. We did not have a lot of snowfall, and so that makes me really worried because we live in a forest.
Mhm,
So, I'm really concerned about how much water all of our trees are gonna get, and then, of course, wildfires are a big problem up here too.
mhm,
So, fingers crossed that we don't have to deal with that. But again, it's when our ecosystem is a little bit out of equilibrium, right? Then we really have to worry about these natural disasters a little bit more versus if we had native plants that, were able to be robust and work as some kind of firewall, then I feel like that's really beneficial too. So out here, we've cut down about like a 20-foot to 30-foot radius around our property. And like some of our solar panels, we've removed a lot of like sagebrush. We have so much sagebrush and so much blooming sage. And I'm highly, highly allergic to it. Like I went to go cut down a bush this last summer and I found out how allergic I was. I just, brushed it a little bit, because I'm
mhm.
cutting it down and nonstop sneezing. And then the eyes are watering, the nose is burning. So these native plants are a little dangerous to me. At
They're
least
artemisia. I think sagebrush is artemisia, right? I think it's very
uh,
fragrant, if I'm thinking
very,
the
yeah.
name. Yeah, definitely. They want to grow. They just want to grow, and
They grow so well
they
too.
do. Yeah, yeah. Um, it's really great to see people finally catching on, though. I don't know how it is up there, but I think down here with the drought that we had last year and the freezes that we're
Mhm.
getting, people are finally like, well, I'm really tired of replacing my oleander bush every single year. So people are slowly but surely they're catching on. So I'm really excited about it.
I love that. And that's really so cool that you came from a nursery that was focused on native plants
Mhm.
too, because that is not all nurseries.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's really unique and really cool that that is like a focus point of that nursery. We might have like one or two in town in the valley that are really focused on native plants. And I think it's beautiful, and the whole education around native plants is really important too. Gets people excited because it's less work too.
So much less. Yeah, I'm excited about kind of sort of going different places with my business and like my educational, mission. Because one of the comments I get on my videos a lot is, where can I find this? I don't have anywhere to find native plants in my area. So that lets me know that, there is an availability issue. People want native plants. They just need help finding them too. So that's something I'm like, okay, cool. I think I could, dedicate my entire life to this. So I'm going to do that.
I love that. So you put together an ebook for native plants in Texas, right?
I did, yeah. So that book's kind of like my little baby. It's Texas-wide natives, so that I grew in Houston. So, and one thing that I kind of like realized is that it's really important to look at your ecoregion, and Texas is so huge that there's like
Mhm.
7 different ones. So some plants that are native to like West Texas, they're going to do terrible in Houston. But yeah, I put together that book because when I was recommending plants to customers, or when I was doing my side business, I was recommending the same plants over and over again. And I was like, I should really write this down or something. And plus, I was like, getting ready to leave my job. I was like, I'm going to need some sort of passive income sort of thing.
Mhm.
So I was like, let me just put this together. I've always liked writing, and, that's volume one. Hopefully, I'll do a volume two and see kind of what direction I should take the next one in. But yeah, that book's like my little baby. I love it.
Aw. I love that. Do you have any recommendations for other resources for people to find native plants in their area?
Yes. So a lot of people are part of a chapter of the Native Plant Society in their local group. So what you can do is you can go online to the North American Native Plant Society. They have a website there, and if you click on external resources and then click Native Plant Societies, you can actually find the Native Plant Society for your area or for your state. And those people are the people that are going to clue you into, hey, where can I find native plants? They're also usually more than willing to trade plants. That's the thing about native plants. They're very good at growing, so you're constantly just like, does anybody want some fall obedient plant? Like, I have so much of it. So that's where you can get, native plants for free. A lot of times they'll do swaps and things like that. Also, if you are in a very remote location, Native American Seed Company is a great seed resource for ordering native seeds, native grasses, native turf grasses. So they're online. I believe their website is called seedsource.com, but it is Native American Seed Company. And the best time to plant generally wildflowers is like the fall, at least here in Texas. So if you order those, you'll be set. They have a great selection on there. And this is not sponsored. I just love them.
I love that. I think people have told me to sprinkle my wildflower seeds on top of the snowpack, and
Oh.
then that helps them, like, cold stratify. At least in Idaho,
Oh.
that works for us.
Right, yeah. Yeah, 'cause you're
And
really
then
just trying to mimic how nature would have dropped the seeds, so I'm assuming they would have dropped them into the snow, and then they just figure it out, I guess. Um,
yeah, yeah. 'Cause a lot of wildflowers up here, they have to be cold stratified for at least, like, 6
yes.
to 8 weeks,
Mhm.
and that's something that I've had to learn the hard way, and
Yeah.
I planted echinacea and all these beautiful, cone flowers and, balsam arrowroot,
Mhm.
and didn't take off. The seeds didn't germinate, and so I had to
Yes.
go back to the drawing board and do a little bit of homework to figure out why that didn't work.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
we
same
have
here.
yeah, I have so much to learn, so I'm really excited to dig into those resources. And I love that a lot of people are plant swapping. I think that is so cool. I found so many cool people within the plant community that are like, I collected these marigolds. Do you want them?
Yeah.
I'll sell you some seeds. Put these all over your garden.
There is so much free plants out there, and that's another thing too, is that native plants are pretty inexpensive, especially if you have a place where you can get them for free, or if you do seeds, or if you can find a nursery. Like, I know at my old job, we would have small ones for like $3. So yeah, if you want a huge plant, it's going to run you a bit of a check, but
Yeah.
if you start small, then you will save so much money. And of course, when you install, like, I'll do a landscape design or something, and I'll have the plants set up, and they're like, "That's it," and I'm like, "Trust me, you're gonna wish I planted less a year from now," because they just grow so incredibly well, and you don't need that many to get started, which is really nice. You see like these freshly done installed landscapes with all of the
Mhm.
non-native plants, and I'm like, how many thousands of dollars did that cost you? And people are sick of it. They're tired of replacing these plants that they spent thousands of dollars on. And I'm like, well, if you have like $100 and an empty bed, oh my gosh, you can take that very far. It will go a long
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. And then you'll have all of the birds and the bees and all
Yes.
of the insects that come along with it and feed on those too. I love that.
Yeah, it's so cool. And the best part too about it is like, you get to have this connection with nature and you get to see all of these like insects and butterflies and hummingbirds and that would have never been there if you hadn't done that. I think before I started gardening at my I live with my parents that started gardening at their house. God bless them. They let me plant all this stuff. So I had never seen a bee, a butterfly, whatever. Finally, I decided I'm going to plant a vine, a Carolina jessamine. It's like this yellow flower vine. Immediately, I was just like swarmed by bees, and I was just like, I've never experienced this. And too, with like hummingbirds, and when you
Wow.
see like something like a hummingbird, it is like this most magical little moment because they almost always like fly away. They're like, oh, a person,
Mhm.
they fly away. But it's like, so it's just you and the hummingbird. There's no like opportunity to pull out your phone and record it, unfortunately.
I know, it's so fleeting. We have a little family of hummingbirds that hang around out here, and every time they come around, I yell, I'm like, "Chip, Chip, there's a hummingbird out here, run over here." And of course, by the time he gets there, it's gone.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I'll
It's
be hanging out in
nice.
the greenhouse and I hear
Oh,
like their buzz, right? Because their wings flap so
yeah.
fast. And I'm like, "Oh my God, where is he?" And I'm like searching for this hummingbird.
Yeah, there's something too about like the low maintenance side of planting natives too, because like a lot of people have hummingbird feeders. I'm lazy. I am a lazy gardener. I don't want to spend that. So I don't want to clean a hummingbird feeder when I could just grow a
Yeah.
plant that's, gonna have nectar for the hummingbird anyway. So when you plant things that can achieve your goals, it'll work.
Low maintenance native plants, they're the way to go.
Oh yeah, people that's something people say to me a lot. I'm like, "Okay, can you help me find a plan?" I'm like, "Sure, yeah. What are you looking for?" I just want something low maintenance. I'm like, "Don't we all?" But and then I'm like, "Can you elaborate?" And they're like, "Well, I just don't want to have to water it. I don't want to have to cover it." And I'm like, "Okay, so you want a native plant. Let's go. I got you."
I love that. So let's talk about houseplants for a little bit here too,
Okay.
because I know you love your houseplants. I do too. I'm slowly getting rid of all of them because they're just becoming so much work to keep up with, on the homestead while I have this massive property and all these animals to take care of.
Absolutely.
But for people who are looking for houseplants, I know you've got some great tips. Buy
Mhm.
small houseplants, don't buy the big one. And you've got all of the fungus gnat tips too. So
Yes.
just tell me all about it.
Yeah, so I think the biggest success factor for houseplants, because people are like, oh, I just don't know I bring the plant home and it starts dying. The problem is, it's a lighting thing. You have to utilize your windows. It's so important because that's how your plant makes food. And a lot of people, so the term used often is bright indirect light. And people are like, well, what does that even mean? People think it means like away from the window, but it actually means it's my opinion. It means your plant is in your window, but what makes it bright indirect light is that your window pane is going to be filtering that UV light, so it's not as intense. But of course, like everyone, lives in different locations, so
Mhm.
my window may be less bright than someone else's, and also the direction of your window does matter. But lighting is the biggest success factor that I'm seeing because a lot of times people do bring home a plant and it starts to decline and they're like, why is this happening? It's because it was grown in these perfect conditions in this greenhouse, then you brought it home and now it's kind of struggling to acclimate to your space. So everyone's like, don't overwater. Well, it's a lot easier to overwater when you have low light, which a lot of people do have lower light, but you just need to pick plants that aren't going to show that low light. So like if you grow like a succulent, it's going to start even in a really bright window. Succulents just stretch and because they're trying to find that light source. So you just got to pick the right plants that aren't going to be so obviously like struggling for light, which is I truly believe there's a plant for every situation. Yes.
I love that. Find your plant soulmate.
Yeah, yeah, like there's something that'll work for you. It's a lot of trial and error. I mean, we've all killed plants. I've killed
So
plants.
many.
That's how you learn, and everybody's kind of starting to realize that. So, but it is unfortunate when you spend a lot of money on a house plant. Houseplants are kind of expensive, which
Yeah.
is another way that you got to get in these plant groups on Facebook and Instagram or whatever, where people will just trade you cuttings, because the
Yeah.
houseplants are absolutely blowing up. The grocery stores have houseplants.
Oh
Everybody's
my God.
Target has houseplants.
No
And
way.
yeah, yes, at least I think they have like some kind of collaboration with a plant influencer. But
Wow.
yeah, you got to pick the right plants for sure.
Yeah, my biggest gripe is, like, walking into Home Depot or Lowe's, like, these big box stores, and seeing painted plants. Like,
Oh
it
yeah.
drives me crazy. The spray painted cactuses or the cacti, I'm just like, "What are we doing here?" Someone's gonna buy that, take it home, and it's gonna die.
It's so weird. Like, it just looks very, very strange. Yeah, it's almost
Mm,
like they kind of set you up to fail in certain situations, especially with things like orchids. And like, if you ever see, the orchids in the store, they're usually just stuffed with sphagnum moss in those little cups. And
mhm.
people just throw them away after they're done blooming. But it's just not what orchids actually want. They want like airflow in their roots, they want bark, and they don't want ice cubes. I keep saying that. My neighbor just gave me her orchid because I said I'd repot it for her, and the little tag on it says just add ice, 3 ice cubes per week. I was like, is this a joke?
Oh my
Are you serious? Why are we instructing people to do things the wrong way? And I'm pretty like chill about the way that people garden. Like I don't ever want to tell someone that they're doing it wrong. But there's one thing if you are the one giving the information and it's incorrect. So yeah, so I think people just shouldn't feel too bad about killing their houseplants. But a great source that I love to look at actually is Wikipedia. Like I'll just look up my plant
Wow.
on Wikipedia because it'll tell you where the plant is native to and kind of like the history of it or whatever. And that way you can be like, oh, okay, well, this plant is native to South America. So it probably likes jungles and, bright light, hot temperatures, and it kind of puts into perspective. And that works for any plant, really. I'll Google any kind of plant and go to Wikipedia, and it tells me a little bit about it.
That's so cool. Do you have any recommendations for plant identification apps? I know we were just talking about this earlier this week because I sent you a photo and I was like, "Rachel, what are these?
Yes.
And what's the best resource?" I know you have an iPhone, so tell
Mhm.
us about there's a identification within
Yeah,
the
so if you have an iPhone, and there may be something on the other phones as well, I'm just not sure. If you go on iPhone and you have a picture of, I think it does animals as well. So I'll do like insect identification on there. So if you have your photo of the plant that you took, there's like on the bottom, it'll make like a little sparkle almost, and you click on it, and it will be like look up plant, and it'll tell you what it is based on. I think it like cross references with pictures on the internet, so it's not always 100% accurate, but it can help you in the
Mhm.
right direction. But I found the most crazy reliable plant identification is actually a forum on Reddit. If you ever go on Reddit, it's super convenient. I would make an account just to use this subreddit, but it's a forum. Basically, you post a photo, and it's called "What's this plant?" I believe it's like Red. I forget how you look up a Reddit link, but it's r// what's this plant, and you just
Mhm.
post it and you post your location so that it kind of gives people like a little bit of information. Within like 15 minutes someone will identify the plant. And that way it's a real person, it's not an AI thing where they're like, well, this leaf
Right.
shape looks kind of, because a lot of times that AI stuff is not accurate. So that forum has been insanely helpful, and sometimes I'll go on there and identify things for people because I am a nerd and I just like to do it for fun. And sometimes like you'll get different answers, but then people start chiming in and they're like, no, 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 it's definitely this one. So it's a really great way to get like for free, because there's a lot of paid identification apps, which I don't think you should ever pay for because Reddit will do
Mm.
it for free.
I love that. Pro tips. Get on Reddit, everybody.
Reddit, yeah, I mean, Reddit is immensely helpful for other things too, but that "What's this plant?" forum is just so genuinely helpful, and everybody just does it for free. It's
Yeah.
great.
And that's how it should be. I love that. There's so many, books that you can buy, and there's so many other things that you can buy, right? All of these identification apps where it really builds community. And I love that when you can connect with other plant people and just figure this out. And I love the encouragement too that I always find on the internet. People are like, keep searching, keep going, keep digging.
Oh yeah, I'll be online typing paragraphs of advice. I'm like, this is what you should do. I would do this, just for free. I just want to help people, and I want everyone to have kind of the feelings that I have, growing plants, which is how I came up with my business name, Rachel Reynolds Dreamscapes, because I was in my backyard one day. I go out there usually every morning, at least on the weekends. Usually I'm running late to work, but now I don't have a job. So I go out there with my coffee or whatever. And it was spring and I was standing there and I was looking at like my roses and just my garden in the back, and it was breezy. And I just looked around and I was like, I am in a dream right now. This is crazy. Like, I want everyone to feel like this connection with their plants, even if it's house plants or if it's like vegetables or something like that. There
Yeah.
is so much to grow, and there is just like this treasure trove of rewarding feelings when you grow plants. So some people are like, oh, I'm not a plant person. I'm like, but you could be. It doesn't have to be your whole life. It's my whole life, but it doesn't have to be your whole life.
Yeah, I love that. It's that connection with nature. We're organic beings, but we benefit so much from grounding, with the earth and just like touching plants. There's so much benefit just from touching a plant. The electrons that you swap back and forth, it's numerous. It's numerous. So I love that, that conversation is, if you're not a plant person now, give it a shot. It doesn't have to be your whole life, and that's okay if it's not.
Hmm. There is a plant to fit every lifestyle, and that's too the thing about natives. A lot of the the things that people don't like about natives is like they look kind of bad in the winter, or they're like weedy or ugly. I think that there is a native plant to fit every landscape style, like that formal landscape style. There are plants that will fit that, and there's plants that fit like the non-traditional, the wild landscapes, of course. I think there's a native plant for everyone. So I think that you just got to find the ones that you like. There's endless opportunities out there to find them. And I just hope people will definitely look into it. If they're having trouble gardening, just try a native, and you'll start to realize like, oh, okay, it's so full circle. Like a lot of people here in Houston, especially, they're like, nothing grows in my clay soil. Everything I plant is dying. And I'm like, okay, just hear me out. Like, plant a Houston native plant, because they're the ones that like actually need that clay soil. And then
Uh-huh.
you'll be like, oh my gosh, like I'm just like, okay, just think about it like one step further, and we're
Wow.
there.
Yeah. We just got to get through the first step.
Yes, yeah.
So, speaking of native plants looking a little bit weedy in the fall or the winter, when is the best time to trim those so that you're not disrupting all of the pollinators that are using
Mhm.
those homes for,
Yeah.
hosts?
Yeah, or solitaire or native bees and things like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I usually will trim back things in the early spring. So once I start to see new growth come out of the
Mhm.
plant, that's when I'll trim the dead stuff
Mhm.
off. But generally, yeah, you want to leave all that stuff, because while it may look dead, I call it winter interest. It's actually, the birds and other animals eating those seeds. I mean, that is their idea of a winter wonderland. So you've got all of these dried seeds and all of these delicious little snacks for them, and you can just leave it there. So it is very low maintenance. You do nothing. You go inside and you drink a hot cocoa and you just sit there.
And you hibernate as well.
Exactly, yeah. So I would say just leave everything as is, especially like leaf litter is a huge tool that you can use to actually
Mhm.
protect your plants from the cold. Leaf litter, it's not even frost cloth that's super helpful. It's leaf litter. Leaf litter breaks down and releases heat, so it actually insulates your plants really, really well, and it also creates, what is it like homes for beneficial insects to protect them in the winter. So, once the leaves fall, sure, you can rake them, but I would even argue that you should just leave them there or dump them into your garden bed to protect all of your plants from the
Even
freeze.
better.
and then just leave everything as is. So prune once you start to see new growth, pretty much.
Cool. That's awesome. I have just learned something. I never know when to prune correctly. So thank you for
Yeah.
that.
A lot of times, like, it's pruning is pretty hard to mess up, I honestly believe, like, unless you're pruning something, like, right before a bloom cycle, that's when it can
Mhm.
kinda be a mistake, but generally, like, especially with natives, like, it's really hard to mess it up. And yeah, a lot of people do get scared about the pruning, but, it's generally okay to prune.
Cool. Yeah, we do a lot of limbing up as well, just
Okay.
because a lot of our trees are overgrown. So we limb them up about like 6 or 8 feet. Is there a certain time that we should be doing that? Does that matter?
For trees, like deciduous
Yeah.
trees. Yeah, deciduous trees, you wanna prune them when they're not growing, so those you would wanna prune in, like, winter, January. Here, winter is, like, January. January, half of February is our winter. So yeah, those are, like, they're not growing, that's when you wanna do things like prune lightly or do your trimming at that point, 'cause you're not really inhibiting them from growing any
Okay.
further.
Okay. That's good to know. I've got that
Yeah,
noted.
yeah.
Cool. Well, any final advice for anybody wanting to add native plants or add some new house plants to their yard or their home? Any final farewells?
Yeah, definitely. And this is just something that I have realized through my mission, trying to get these points across. You don't have to do a lot to make a difference. You know, there's so many things that you can do as an individual to help with the environment and native plants. When I do talks, sometimes I got this question a couple weeks ago, and this woman was like, I walk around my neighborhood and all I see is these invasive plants and I see these non-native plants. What do I do about this? It's so upsetting. And I was like, I mean, yeah, it is a little sad, but if you
Mhm.
look at it that way, you're going to be forever upset about, it'll be sad. You as an individual can actually accomplish a lot. Like if you make an effort to get rid of invasive plants in your home, even if you just grow one single like pollinator plant in a pot on your balcony, you can be part of the movement. And now some butterfly that's like trying to make its way from one natural area to the other now has somewhere to eat on the way over. So it doesn't happen like, I've been making videos about this for about a year, and only recently my following increased. But I was like, why does no one want to hear me talk about native trees? God, like, why does no one care about this? And I'm like, okay, it's not going to be like this massive, like everyone wakes up one day and they're like, oh my God, native plants are the answer.
Yeah.
It happens one person at a time, one conversation at a time, one plant at a time. We're gonna get there, and I'll die on this hill.
I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah. I am so behind that movement too. Just one seed at a time. If that's all you
Mhm.
do, that's great because you're doing more than the person who's not doing anything at all.
Yeah, yeah. It's easy to get started. Well, I don't want to say that. It's easy once you get started. Getting started can be a little intimidating, but that's why I love the resources like the Native Plant Societies. Another great person to look up, who was a super inspirational, kind of clued me into the whole thing, is Doug Tallamy. Have you heard of him?
I don't think so.
Okay, he says has like a PhD, and he kind of restored his giant uh, property that he had full of native plants, and he's kind of bringing back all of these native species. But he puts it in words that are way more eloquent than me. He has the PhD.
Yeah.
I sort of just have like, I'm so passionate about this, and I just can talk about it all day long. But Doug Tallamy puts it in a way that is very, very concise and says it very, very well. So he has a couple of books and does talks and things like that. So definitely check him out as well if you're looking
Cool.
for a more in-depth conversation about this.
Oh, I love that. I have one more quick story. So when I was visiting my friends in Tennessee, they were driving me through the mountains. I went to go visit them in Chattanooga, and they have bamboo growing amok over there. And they were telling me that some guy way back in the day started growing bamboo in his yard, and it just overgrew. And now this bamboo is just consuming the mountainsides of Tennessee. And it's non-native, but bamboo is so hard to kill. And so I think that's another really important thing to talk about, just as one last bit before we leave, that planting these invasive species they really take away so much from all of the native species and the wildlife, that need those native plants to thrive.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's plants that contribute to the native, the food web, so like native plants. And then there's plants that just kind of sit there and they don't really do anything. They're just kind of sitting there, growing, whatever. And then there's plants that take away from the local food webs, like invasive species and bamboo and things like that. And a lot of times it's like people are like, but these plants grow so well here. That's the problem.
Mhm.
Yeah, bamboo is ridiculous sometimes. There are some kinds that are, I think there's two different like categories of bamboo. There's clumping and spreading, and I want to say clumping is like the safer kind to grow, but generally, like I'm just not a fan of bamboo. I mean, it's a non-contributor, at least in our,
Mhm.
I'm sure in Asia and things like that, it's helpful for their local food webs. All these Asian plants that we bring over are beautiful, but they have no benefit to our local ecosystems. They should have, they would provide food for animals over there in their native range, but not here, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. So everybody take that into consideration when you're planting in your yard.
Yeah. And it does suck sometimes because, invasive plants are being sold in big box stores.
Right.
And yeah, they're a lot of times they're the plants that people have the most success with, which I'm happy for them that they got a plant to grow, but I wish it wasn't that plant.
Exactly.
So yeah, just the industry, the big box store, the capitalism plant industry, they sometimes don't have your back. So you kind of have to watch out for yourself and use your local resources if you have them, and kind of do your own research, which is
Yeah, I
it's unfortunate. Yeah.
yeah, it is. I think a safe rule of thumb is just research before you buy,
Mm,
because you could just think of it where you're buying a plant, but if you do a little bit of research on the needs of the plant or learning about where it came from, or where it originated, you can learn so much more about the needs of that plant and if that would really add to your home or your garden or your yard.
mhm. Yeah, is it something that you really want, or is it just kind of like a impulse buy? But yeah, they do sell even like the Bradford pear. I'm sure you've heard all of the
Oh my gosh.
conversation about the Bradford pear this year. Every year, really, like any kind, you see like a flowering pear at the store, might be a Bradford pear. Yeah, the big box stores don't have your back sometimes, so
Mm,
it's really if you can try and research it yourself, you'll get there.
you'll get there.
Mhm.
So, as a reminder for everybody, take a look at North American Native Plant Society and Native American Seed Company. Rachel, can you remind us of the website for Native American Seed Company?
Yes, it's seedsource.com.
Great. And those resources will help you find native plants in your area. So, again, if you guys are curious, head to the internet, jump on a Reddit thread.
Yeah. There's probably native plant threads on Reddit too, that can
Yeah, or
maybe
even
help you.
Facebook groups. You could probably
Oh
find
yeah.
like a local native plant group in your area and do a plant
Mhm.
swap.
Yeah, I mean, there's people that have been in the movement for years, and so now more people are catching on. It's great. So there are resources out there, and of course, if you're having trouble finding them, you can always reach out to me on Instagram, and I will try my best to help you figure it out. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys learned so much more about native plants. Thank you, Rachel, so much for all of the information here. And then where can we find you?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun to chat with you. Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram and I'll list my email as well. My Instagram is RachReynDreamScapes. So it's the first four letters of both my names, Rachel Reynolds. Then my email is rachel.reynolds49@gmail.com. And you can email me anytime. I usually respond the fastest to Instagram. Email is not my favorite, but I definitely will get your message responded to by the end of my days for sure.
We will take care of all of your plant questions, and we hope that we inspired you guys to plant some native flowers or native plants and to do a little bit more research on all of the native plants to really boost your ecosystem. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Rachel. We'll
Thanks
see
for
you guys
having
next
me.
time.
Go native.
Go native.
Awesome.